Hello and welcome. I am Erica Poplinsky-Burge, and as always, I am so excited to be with elementary. I love languages at all ages, but elementary is my favorite spot. I have taught every grade from pre-K to eighth grade, and I was in the classroom for 18 years, just, to share a little bit about myself. And I am going to go over Primaria 1 and Primaria 2. These are our titles for elementary, and I got to help with both of these. So today, we are going to talk about who the series was made for, the organization of a typical unit, key resources, my favorite resources, and then some tips on pacing the curriculum. And in the chat is the link for if you have questions. I will be at the, oh, there's the chat. I will be at oh, hello. Sorry, I'm seeing some familiar faces in the chat. I will be at the Q&A later, so if you have questions, I will be there for you. So Primaria 1 is for students in K through second grade, and it's for novice level students. And as you can see, it is full of adorable animals from around the Spanish speaking world because most students really relate to and adore animals. So it's a great way to open the doors to the Spanish speaking world to our younger students and to help them get to explore the world and the many cultures around the world. The picture there is of a bat, and we use this adorable bat to talk about colors with students, and it's a really adorable story. And then Primaria number 2 is geared towards students in third through fifth grade. Again, novice level students, and it can be, but for Primaria 2, we feature kids from all over the Spanish-speaking world, and many of them are friends, and not to give anything away, but in the final story, they all meet at a music festival in Chile. And as you will see with this lower picture, the pictures for Primaria 2 are more like graphic novel or comic book looking to appeal to older students. And the pictures are really full of great things that we can talk about with all of our students. Now, just like most of Voces, we build from individual words and phrases to sentences and brief interactions to paragraphs and short texts, all the way to longer texts and discourse. And this is how we learn all languages, whether you're talking about a baby learning their first language or an older person learning their second, third, or fourth language. We start with these individual words and phrases, and then we build from there. And that's how Voces is set up to follow the way our brains naturally acquire languages. And through these stories, through these sentences and brief interactions, we give you ways to introduce culture and to open the doors to cultures from all over the world, which I think is one of the most important things that we do as language teachers, as well as give you opportunities for input, output, and interaction with our students. So all of the good things, essentially. Now, a unit is organized, and you'll see this on the left-hand side. We start with the introduction to Unit 1, or whatever unit you're in, and there's an introduction for teachers as well as an introduction for students. Then you will have your stories. And in Primaria 2, we have 3 stories as well as a longer story in the evaluation section. When you are underneath a story, and all these drop-down arrows just show you there's more things underneath them, you'll have your vocabulary. And over here on the right, you'll see a vocabulary page for one of our first stories. All of these little headphones with the sound show you that you actually have native speaker audio for all vocabulary, so students can hear the vocabulary not only in your voice, but also with native speaker audio, so they get exposed to different accents, which is fabulous. Then we have our empezamos activities, which are generally movement-based, often non-screen activities that students that get students building their language skills and working with the vocabulary more, getting them extra repetitions. Then we have the actual story. After the story, we have a Veamos video, and this is kind of, if you grew up in the 80s like me, you might remember those old stories where it would focus on one part of, it was almost like reading a story, but the camera would zoom in on different parts of the picture and there would be sound effects. So it's kind of like the story in video form. And then we have follow-up activities. And finally, then you get into the next story. after you've gone through the stories, or you can intermix them with the stories, we also have extra extra. And extra extra contains things like interview videos with Spanish speaking students from all over the world, videos or cartoons specifically geared towards Spanish language learners, as well as photos that you can use to explore the world. And then finally, we have our evaluation, which is a test and another story, our unit structures, and then the kind of the work, all the work the student has done throughout the unit. So again, this is some of the vocabulary with the native speaker audio for one of our first stories in Primaria 2. And then here are our empezamos activities, and those deal with the same vocabulary that we just introduced and help us bridge that gap between the short vocabulary, the individual words and phrases, all the way up into using these words more authentically. And this is one of my favorite empezamos activities. And it is this chameleon family, because the little girl, or the girl in the first story, has a chameleon pet. And you can use this to review family vocabulary. You can talk about the relationships the chameleons have to each other. And then you can play a bunch of games with this. And one of the games that I recommend playing is Guess Who? And I actually designed all of these empezamos activities where you describe one of these characters and the students get to guess which character you're describing. And you can use a lot of vocabulary and help students with their listening skills. You can also play 20 questions with this, where you ask students ask you questions and then try to guess which character is your character. And then the other empezamos activities in this section are charades with the vocabulary, which you can do with a lot of vocabulary, and un animal especial, a special animal, and that actually walks you through. It's like a little mini book about chameleons. And then at the end, students get to pick between one of 4 coloring pages and name their chameleon and say how it's feeling. And so it's a great way for them to reapply the vocabulary and personalize it. So all of that is part of the empezamos activities. And then you get to the actual story. And this is from our Primaria 2 book, but you'll see that it's very accessible language. You have native speaker audio, and that audio can be sped up or slowed down depending upon the needs of your students. And then you have these really beautiful pictures. You can just tell the story, but there's lots to talk about in this picture, whether it's the Colombian flag or the pet that she has or her relationship to these 2 people. There's all sorts of things you can talk about in the picture. You may have noticed that when you're looking at the story, these blue words are words that we're not 100% sure students will know. So if I was not on a screenshot, but I was actually in the program and I hovered over this blue word, the English translation would pop up. So those are really nice for students because students who don't need it won't bother to look, but students who do need it will have the support that they need. You can also print the stories and make little mini booklets for students to take home. So there's a lot here that you can do with your students with these stories. Oh, and I just had to point this out. This is from an illustration later in the same story. It's one of my favorite illustrations. In this book, our main character loses her pet, and then her family is all looking for the pet throughout like the coffee fields. And I always have students try to find all the chameleons because there's lots of little chameleons hidden in that picture. Students love that sort of thing. And again, it's a great way to start to talk about coffee in Colombia and culture, but through a relatable thing like about a pet being lost, which are things that students experience. This is from another story entirely from Primaria 1, and I just wanted to show you that you have the adorable animals, which students can really relate to. And this is one about families as well, so we're using similar words, but just at an easier level because it's from our beginning book, whereas the other one was from our Primaria 2 book. After the story, you have activities you can have students do. Now, if you look over here, anything with this little lightning bolt is auto-graded. So if you have student accounts, it will automatically be graded. And then the little mountain are can-do statements. So there are can-do statements that go with each of these. And then the apples means that currently this is a teacher only. So the students will not see this in their accounts. This is teacher only. However, our program is fully editable, so you can go in and turn anything that is teacher only into student view. You can edit things, you can change things. There's so much you can do with Voces. It's one of the many things I love about it. With these multiple choice, if you have really young students, sometimes I'll just project them up on the board and I will read it. There's audio here, but you can also just read it and have students go up and touch the right answer. You can have students play it as a game where they talk with a friend and pick the right answer, or you can have students just do it on their own. There's lots of things you can do, but there is audio to go with our multiple choice. And then here we have this is a matching activity where students are going to match the sentence to the picture. And again, it's great. It's extra reading, extra repetitions of the key vocabulary, but in sentence form. So we're expanding a little bit. And then next we have a drawing activity. Most students that I have worked with, and I have worked with thousands of elementary students, love to draw. And I always tell my students, you don't have to be an artist to enjoy this. So students are going to draw something from the story. If you have more advanced students, you can always have them write something to go with their picture as well. And there's a camera right there, so you can have students take a picture within the app and submit it that way. So that way they can keep their picture, but you can still have a record of their work, which is really nice. Up next are some of my favorite resources, and one of my absolute favorite things we have in our extra section are these videos with interviews with students from all over the Spanish-speaking world. So you can just listen to the video and talk about what he's saying in the video or what any of the other students are saying in the video, and they're from all different countries. You can talk about what you see in the video. Like, I'm sure there's some things in this video that students would see that they're like, oh, I've had a Pepsi, or I worn Adidas, so students can compare and contrast. But then the videos also have pop-up questions, which I really love. So you can just watch the video with your students and see what they learn, but you can also do the pop-up question where it will, for example, here it says, he has a small family, and you can say yes or no. If your students get it wrong, or if they're not sure of the answer, you can click on replay the last segment, and it will actually automatically rewind the video for you, and you will hear him say the answer. And again, that's just extra repetitions. And maybe your students didn't hear it the first time, but after they read this sentence and you've discussed it as a group, they can go and listen the second time and they'll get it the second time. And I'm always both surprised and excited by how much students get from being able to repeat just that one thing that they need. Another one of my absolute favorite resources are these articles, and these are leveled articles. So they're already scaffolded for your students. They have version A, B, or C, and version A is the most simple version of the article, and it has some pretty basic questions that go with it. Version B is a little bit more complicated and has a little bit more complicated questions. And version C is the full article with the highest level questions. And you can use these however is best for your students. You could print these articles and give students only one version of them depending upon their level, but you could also start with version A, then build a version B and version C and so on. So this is about Lydia, and we already know she likes animals with the chameleon in the story we just read. So it's talking about animals in the jungle in Colombia, and there's the version A. Version B, again, just a little bit more language, a little bit harder questions. And finally, version C, which is the full article with the higher level questions and more reading. And you could do these all with all of your students, or you could break them up and assign them to students based on their level. There's so many ways that you can kind of use these with your students in the appropriate ways. Oh, and I have a comment that someone's students love going through the different levels, mine too. And I love seeing their confidence build as they're like, oh my gosh, I just read, 4 whole paragraphs in Spanish. That's such a great confidence builder, which we want them to be confident because learning the language is for everyone. All right, up next, one of my other favorite things are the world in pictures. There's so much, and this picture does not match this menu over here, so I apologize for that. But there's so much you can do with these. You can just, this is a panorama, and every single chapter has one. You can look around the panorama, you can zoom in or out on things, you can talk about the things you see in the picture, you can make up a whole story about something you see in the picture, or if you just need something that's not so teacher focused, I will play I Spy with my students at the end of class with these pictures. And that's a really fun way to get your students involved in the language. It's less teacher focused, so you can sit down for a minute. So there's tons you can do with these pictures, and they are right there for you. Students also just love to explore the pictures on their own. And then, and Zachary, I see your question. I will get to it if I have a chance. Otherwise, throw that in the the question form, which I just threw in the chat, or come to the Q&A at 1 to 1:30. Learn, and we did it at the exact same time. We're on the same wavelength. Thank you. Another absolute favorite thing that people don't always realize is in Primaria 1 and 2 are coloring pages. Most kids and many adults really like to color. And so you can color with these pages. You can just have students color the next day as they come in, but there are a lot of other activities that you can do with these coloring pages. I'm going to resist explaining them right now, but I have an elementary focus session on Thursday, and I will go to some of the things you can do with coloring pages, but they're there for you. And they're another great way that you can have students involved in the story without having to be giving all the energy, because I know sometimes I personally would see 8 to 10 classes a day, and sometimes I just need a minute to not be talking. Finally, how do you pace the unit? If you are in a Voces title and you go to the teachers panel and then click on resources, you will see all these additional resources. There are tons of wonderful additional resources here, including a scope and sequence, a pacing guide, actful alignments, comic strips, which I am going to talk about both later today in ways to teach a story, but also when I go to the elementary session on Thursday, and all sorts of other things. But the pacing guide and the scope and sequence is what we're going to focus on with my last 3 minutes. The pacing guide breaks up each unit, and it tells you what each of the stories is about, as well as what grammar and vocabulary, what high frequency structures you're going to be teaching in the stories. So that kind of gives you an idea of where you're at and where you're going at a glance. That can be really helpful, especially if you need to lay out a year. And then this is the scope and sequence. I'm sorry, this is the pacing guide. We just looked at the scope and sequence. And this kind of shows you different ways you can do the program. Like if you are doing an exploratory program where you only have 20 minutes once or twice a week, this is about roughly how long it will take you. If you have 3 to 4 minutes, 30 minutes a week, this is how long it will take you to get through these things. And it kind of gives you an idea of how long it might take you to go through a unit based on how many classes you'll have a week and how often you'll see your students, because we know elementary programs vary quite a bit on what time you get to see your students. I've had it as little as 30 minutes twice a week. And I've heard about teachers who have 45 minutes every day. So we kind of show you how you can use the units with each of these class time running times. And then we go into, if you only have that 20 minutes, here's what we highly think you should do, the check marks, and then the R's are recommended extensions. And so that kind of tells you what we recommend covering under each of those profiles. And then we go even further into say, okay, let's break it down a little bit further. Here's Rock Skipper, and here's what you could do with those 20 minutes. And obviously times will vary for the students that you have in front of you, but we try to really support you in every way that we can, because we know that teaching is a lot of work and we want to make your life as easy as possible. I have 1 minute left. Yay, I got through it all. Hopefully I did not talk too fast. I've had a lot of coffee and sometimes that makes me go really fast. If you have any questions, please come to the Q&A session at 1 o'clock today. Everyone who's presenting will be there and you'll have a chance to ask questions. If you complete that daily survey, which we have in the chat, we will come ready to answer your questions with prepared answers. And if you want more support, sign up for our walkthrough. You can do that at any time. Email us, info@vocesdigital.com. We have many wonderful people monitoring the email. We will get back to you. Explore the hub. The hub is, Erin talked about it this morning. We have tons of resources there, or email us. Thank you for being here for this session. It was really nice to be here with all of you for just a moment. And I believe our next session starts at 11. Is that correct, Lorraine?